Welcome to Module 3, Lesson 2. We're going to look at our first strategy, setting clear expectations. The very first thing that you need to do is establish clear expectations. They should be easy to remember for both you and the students. While you may have read that it's a good idea to co-create your classroom expectations with your students, I'd actually advise against you doing so. This approach can lead to expectations that differ from what you'd intended, potentially setting you up for a frustrating experience. As the teacher, you should set the classroom expectations. If your school has a widely used universal set of expectations, then obviously you should use those. Consistency is the key. Students often become confused when expectations vary. For example, if there are different expectations for your classroom, the music teacher's room, the library, the playground, it can be difficult for students to remember what to do and when. If your school does not have a clear set of expectations, then you can devise them yourself. As I mentioned in the previous module, best practice involves using 3 key expectations, no more and no less. These expectations should be framed positively, and they should state what the students should do rather than what they shouldn't do. And all of these expectations will cover the variety of behaviours that you'll encounter in your classroom. So, an example set of expectations could be in this class or at this school, I will be safe, responsible, respectful. While you, as the teacher, will establish these expectations, you really need to engage your students in discussion about what each one of them looks like in your classroom. Now, depending on the year level or subject matter you teach, they're going to vary. Let's break down the expectations into ways that students could demonstrate them in your classroom. So, these are some examples of how students can be safe. I can be safe by walking indoors and on concrete. I can be safe by using equipment properly. I can be safe by keeping my hands, feet, and objects to myself. I can be safe by sitting on my chair with 4 legs on the ground. I can be safe by keeping my computer password private. Similarly, I can be responsible by having materials ready for the lesson, taking care of my belongings, following instructions, helping others, owning my mistakes, participating actively in the lesson, putting my rubbish in the bin, and so on. Some ideas of being respectful include I can be respectful by listening actively while others are talking, using polite language and kind words, valuing others' opinions, following directions, sharing and turn taking, treating others kindly, showing empathy toward others. Obviously, this list is not exhaustive, and there are many other examples, but you can see that all classroom behaviours can be attributed to one of those 3 things: being safe, being responsible, or being respectful. No matter the age of the students, whether they're 4 or whether they're 17, they will be able to remember those 3 key words, and you, as the teacher, will also find it easy to refer to them. I strongly suggest that you choose one of the expectations to focus on each week. Remember, we're aiming for simplicity and consistency. Don't make it difficult by switching it up each day. So, as part of this course, you also get access to the Facebook group Chaos to Calm community. Within that community, on a Sunday, we're going to do Set It Sunday, where I will set a focus for the week if you'd like to follow along. Let's say we choose being respectful as the expectation of the week. On Monday, we might focus on listening actively while others are talking. Tuesday's focus might be on using kind words, and so on. Then, by the time we get to Friday, what we're going to do is then choose the skill that the students had the most trouble with that week and make it the focus again. Alternatively, you might decide that your class needs to do one skill for the entire week, and so it's very flexible. You need to gauge what's best for your class. So having an expectation of the week and or of the day will give your classroom direction and purpose. You'll be able to explicitly teach and model the behaviours, as well as praise and reinforce the behaviours that you're looking for. If you try to do everything at once, it becomes overwhelming and it's far less effective. What we're aiming to do is build on the student's skill set little by little. This is where the posters come in. Remember, you can find them in the printable section at the very beginning of your course dashboard. The way these posters work is that they are not supposed to be displayed all at once. That is absolutely information overload, and the students will just tune them out. Instead, choose your expectation of the week, choose your focus of the day, and then display that one poster on the wall after you introduce it in your morning session. And again, that you will notice that these posters are framed positively, focusing on how students should demonstrate these expectations rather than how they shouldn't. For example, the rule says, I can be respectful by listening actively when others are talking. It does not say no talking while others are talking. And framing expectations positively is very important. No matter how many years they've been in the school, students need to be explicitly taught what these behaviours look like. You can't just expect them to know what it means because it's written on the board. Remember, they may have had previous teachers who told them what not to do, but never showed them how to do it successfully. And it's up to you to model these behaviours and point out when students are doing the behaviours so that they have a point of reference for what it looks like. You might take photos of students displaying these behaviours and place them around the room for easy reference. For example, you might have a poster on your math wall that shows a student at their desk with their workbook, pencil, sharpener, eraser, and ruler with the caption, I can be responsible by having materials ready. Be very specific about what behaviours you want to display permanently. These will be the ones that make the most difference and that students will likely need to refer back to often, and those that should be displayed as the daily behaviour focus. Remember, you don't want everything displayed all at once because it loses its effectiveness. Over time, as you continually refer to this poster at the beginning of each maths lesson, students will begin to take out these materials automatically. They will also become familiar with the posters around the room, knowing that they can refer to them when they're stuck. It's essential to teach students to solve problems and to provide them with alternate avenues to obtain the necessary information. You are one person and you can't help everyone simultaneously. So, to make your life easier, you need to teach the students strategies such as where to look for help. We're going to spend some time looking at a few different scenarios where the teacher applies the principles of safety, responsibility, and respect to manage student behaviour. In these examples, we're going to focus on basic behaviour redirection and assume that the student responds positively to that redirection. In future modules, we're going to look at what to do if the student doesn't engage or if it's really high level behaviours. So now what I'd like you to do is pause the video and turn to the scenario on being safe on page 49. Now you might be sitting there thinking, this is basic, Sarah, but it's important. It's the basic stuff that can make a huge difference. Oftentimes, behaviour management's not effective because teachers don't approach situations simply and consistently. So let's look at that previous scenario that you've just read and break down some of the key things that Mrs. Harris did. Firstly, she was actively monitoring the area. She didn't just let the situation go unnoticed. Mrs. Harris was aware of her surroundings and kept an eye on her students, ready to step in when necessary. 2. She maintained a calm and positive tone. Rather than reacting with frustration, Mrs. Harris stayed calm and positive, ensuring that the student didn't feel scolded or embarrassed. 3. She asked Alex to remind her of the rule and provided a sentence starter. Mrs. Harris used a simple technique, asking Alex to recall the rule. She even provided him with the sentence starter, I can be safe by, which gently guided him toward the right response. 4. She made Alex repeat it in his own words. By encouraging Alex to say the rule in his own words, Mrs. Harris helped reinforce the concept, making sure that he fully understood it. 5. She explained why it's important. Instead of simply saying, don't run, Mrs. Harris explained why walking on concrete is safer, helping Alex understand the reasoning behind the rule. 6. She praised Alex for demonstrating the expectation correctly. Mrs. Harris didn't just tell Alex what to do, she reinforced the positive behaviour by acknowledging his effort to follow the rule. If Alex hadn't volunteered to show the correct behaviour, Mrs. Harris could have asked him to demonstrate it. And 7, she smiled, leaving the interaction on a positive note. Mrs. Harris ended the interaction with a smile, making sure that Alex felt supported and encouraged rather than reprimanded. So, although this was a brief interaction, it's clear here that Mrs. Harris made several deliberate choices. By consistently following the same procedure when delivering rule reminders, she ensures her students know what to expect each and every time. Now, this consistency makes students more receptive to the reminder, helping to create a positive and structured environment. It's the consistent, calm approach that makes the difference between a teacher who manages behaviour effectively and one who does not. Pause the video here and read the scenario on being responsible on page 51. Now let's look at some of the conscious decisions that Mrs. Thompson made in the scenario that you've just read. 1. She actively scanned the class to see whether the students had their materials ready. It's the teacher's job to ensure students are prepared. Just because you gave an instruction, it should not be assumed that all students have completed it. You need to follow up. So many teachers fall into the trap of assuming that students are ready to begin the lesson. 2. She spoke to Ethan respectfully and asked him what materials he needed to check that he'd understood. This enabled her to see whether Ethan actually knew what he needed. 3. She told Ethan the materials he needed because Ethan's response was unclear. This eliminated potential stress for Ethan. Rather than guessing what the teacher expected, he now knew exactly what he had to get ready. 4. She referred to the be responsible rule, reinforcing where he could look if he had difficulties remembering what he needed for maths. Mrs. Thompson showed Ethan there were alternative places to go if he was confused about where to look. 5. She reassured him and eliminated pressure, giving him time to get his materials ready while the class was warming up. She helped Ethan avoid feeling behind by giving him time to gather his materials while the class was getting ready. It ensured he didn't miss key instructions at the very beginning of the lesson. And finally, she finished on a positive note by giving Ethan a thumbs up, reinforcing his effort and reassuring him that he had the right materials. Nonverbal gestures are an essential tool in managing a classroom. They can provide the reassurance a child needs while not disrupting the rest of the class or the flow of the lesson. Pause the video here and read the scenario on being respectful on page 53. Let's look at some decisions that Mrs. Carter made in the lesson and why they're important. 1. She addressed the issue of the students talking. Mrs. Carter didn't just let it slide. She recognised it needed addressing as they were off task and distracted other students. Remember, the goal of classroom management is to minimise disruption and maximise learning. 2. She used proximity by going closer to the students. She didn't call them out in front of class. Having a quiet word with students individually is more respectful than doing so in front of their peers, and students can be a lot more receptive to this. 3. She used a calm but firm tone. This indicated to the students that they weren't in trouble, but it reinforced the expectation she did need them to actively listen. 4. She didn't label the behaviour. She simply stated what she saw. She never said, "You're being rude." Instead, she said, "I can see you're having a conversation." 5. She clearly explained what behaviour she was looking for. The students didn't have to try and guess what active listening looked like. Mrs. Carter provided them with specific examples, such as looking at the speaker. And finally, she praised the positive behaviour, reinforcing what she expected from the two students. While none of these examples were big behaviours, starting with smaller, more manageable ones is essential. If you don't, all these low-level behaviours will cause a lot of disruption and time off task. It only takes a few students exhibiting low-level behaviours, such as chatting, being disorganised, to throw off an entire lesson. Most of the class will respond to these basic reminders and redirections. By constantly referring to the expectations and consistently redirecting students, you can set your students and yourself up for success. You might feel like a broken record for most of the first term, repeating yourself over and over. However, I can guarantee that if you consistently refer to the expectations, as seen in the scenarios, your classroom will be a lot calmer and a lot less chaotic. Low level behaviors are far easier to change, and so this is absolutely where you should first direct your attention. Take care of those first, and then you'll have more time and energy to focus on the trickier aspects of classroom management.